During the 3 years of diving, Ed and his crew found many things that had nothing to do with the Speedy project. On days when weather was too rough out on the lake, they came in closer to shore where conditions were better. They found spent artillery shells of different sizes there to the east of Dobbs Bank. One day they located the wreck of a World War I bomber aircraft called the Shark. The sand spits along the west side of Weller's Bay had been used as a bombing range during both World Wars, so these findings were not a surprise. They also found a real shipwreck. It was the Mini Schlausen, a three-mast steamer that had sunk during a storm in 1877 about a mile east of the entrance to Presqu'île Bay. One day, when the weather was too rough on the lake, Ed and his crew brought their video cameras and spent about a half hour on the Mini Schlausen. This video was included in the VHS tape that was part of the documents that ended up on my table in 2018. In 1993, Ed did not continue doing work on the Speedy project, but he did spend time searching for test models that had been shot across the south shore of Prince Edward County during the development of the Avro Arrow in the 1950s. Nothing much was found except one broken wing and some overgrown cement foundations. In 1994, Ed provided exploration, equipment, and expertise for a project that was looking for a Spanish galleon called La Capitana, which was thought to have sunk off the coast of Ecuador in 1654. His Canadian contact for this project was Walter Sakarchuk, a renowned Canadian archaeologist who had just recently participated in the largest shipwreck recovery project, the Atasha, which had been found in the 1980s by Mel Fisher of Florida. Ocean Scan Systems was a respected supplier of exploration equipment and expertise for the treasure hunting community. Then there was Cuba. In 1999, Ed Burt became Vice President of Operations for Visa Gold Exploration, Inc., a company that had been set up to search for the remains of Spanish galleons that had sunk in hurricanes in the 1500s along the north shore of Cuba. Ed's job was to outfit an exploration ship in Belleville and have it sent to Cuba. It was called Exploradoro. Initial survey work was promising, and Ed Burt was having the time of his life using his knowledge and expertise on a larger stage. When asked whether he thought they would find anything, he replied, "I don't know. I wish I'd never fallen in love with chasing shipwrecks. I really don't know. But it's an incredible adventure." Unfortunately, new investors changed the project. Ed sensed the danger, and he, along with others, resigned from the project and came home. Whatever the result, Ed Burt had a whale of a time in Cuba. Over the years, Ed undertook a persistent promotional campaign, trying to raise awareness about the Speedy story and looking for interest from corporate or government organizations who might fund further exploration of the Speedy site. There were many newspaper articles where Ed explained the story of the Speedy and made it clear that his intent was to do further exploration of the site. He utilized the HMS Speedy Foundation to spread the word through speaking engagements and discussions with local groups, and even created things like t-shirts and badges for promotional purposes. At one point, he utilized his metal foundry north of Belleville to manufacture replica cannonballs for a promotional campaign. The cannonballs were so lifelike that a rumor spread around Belleville that Ed had removed artifacts from the Speedy site. Of course, that would have been illegal, so the lawyer for the foundation sent some letters around and put an end to that rumor. Ed Burt hated writing reports. Unfortunately, the Ontario ministry that managed archaeological licenses required annual reporting for each site. At the same time, Ed persisted in applying for new licenses for the site each year, even though no survey work was being done. There was ongoing banter between Ed and the ministry on the topic of reporting. By 2005, Ed was so far behind with his reporting that the ministry finally put their foot down. They said that Ed would get no more new licenses unless he at least made an attempt to bring his reporting into compliance. In order to remain eligible for new licenses, Ed was compelled to complete the project report for 1997. Remember, this is 2005. There had been no survey work on the Speedy site since 1992. In his own contrarian way, Ed decided to use this opportunity to provide a full-throated version of what he believed had happened to the Speedy. He'd been leading up to this for a long time, and it all came cascading out in the 1997 project report. It was 120 pages, filled with detailed explanations of every little force and circumstance that Ed believed determined the route of the Speedy and the fate that it suffered. He used almost all the pictures that he had to support his ideas, along with charts and maps to lend context to the story. It was really quite a production. In fact, it left no doubt at all as to Ed Burt's understanding of what had happened to HMS Speedy on October 8th, 1804. The most important page of the report was a nautical chart which showed the estimated route of the Speedy highlighted in a dark blue line. The Speedy sailed from the west, but couldn't make the turn into Presqu'île Bay because of the strong westerly storm at its back. The ship was blown off to the east, and Captain Paxton steered for Weller's Bay, which was open to the lake at that time without any of the sand spits that we know of today. He probably felt that he could ride out the storm in this more protected place and then sail into Presqu'île Bay after the storm passed. Suddenly, however, a nor'easter hit the area. The storm came from northern Quebec and passed across the Great Lakes in a northeast to southwest direction. It brought high winds and frigid temperatures. HMS Speedy was helpless in the face of this violent nor'easter and was blown back out into Lake Ontario. The dramatic climax of the story came when HMS Speedy collided with a rock just below the surface on the shallowest point of Dobbs Bank. It was a violent collision. The hull cracked like an egg, and the decking split apart in seconds. The mast toppled over, and along with the people and the cargo were tossed into the raging lake waters. The 20 souls on board would have died in the collision with the rock, or within minutes as the ship disintegrated around them. Winds and waves pushed the remains of the ship to the southeast from the point of impact, and eventually every piece would settle down into the water and find a resting place on the ground over Dobbs Bank. Some of this might be called speculation. Ed Burt was an engineer. He knew what he had seen on the ground during a survey work, and he felt compelled to provide a dramatic story that would demonstrate how every piece of the ship could end up in that place and in that condition that he saw in the 1990s. We might call it reverse engineering. In 2012, Ed Burt refreshed his HMS Speedy Foundation with a few new faces. I joined at that time, along with a few other folks from the area. As a historian from Brighton, I wanted to learn more about the Speedy story and to hear firsthand from Ed Burt about his diving work in the 1990s. I was also curious to learn about the status of the project at that time. We had several meetings over about 4 years. We discussed many promotional projects, and we delved into the circumstances with the Ontario Ministry about the status of the Speedy site. Ed and I attended numerous speaking engagements where we told the story of the Speedy and tried to make people aware of the situation. Sometimes we went alone, sometimes we went together, such as this event at the Brighton Probus Club in March of 2014. One of the most enjoyable projects that the HMS Speedy Foundation undertook was to create a storyboard that would be installed in the Interpretive Center in Presqu'île Provincial Park. I developed the content, and Phil Spencer, another member of the group, constructed the frame. We shared the installation, and now the storyboard occupies a wall in the small room to the left of the front door. We are very grateful for the support of the Friends of Presqu'île Park, who operate the store in the Interpretive Center. Of course, the storyboard joins the dramatic film that's been there in the theater and the Interpretive Center for a number of years, as well as the historical plaque that's by the shore on the path towards the lighthouse. The story of HMS Speedy is well represented in Presqu'île Provincial Park. However, the mystery remains. Are those artifacts that Ed Burt saw on the floor of Lake Ontario over Dobbs Bank actually remains of the Speedy? The work of Ed Burt seems to provide evidence that it's possible. Of course, Ed Burt always told us that he was 99.99% sure they had found the remains of the Speedy, and he would believe that until the day he died. Bottom line, those artifacts require the attention of professional marine archaeologists. The professionals must go down there in the water over Dobbs Bank and see these artifacts in situ for themselves. Take the latest photographic equipment, take beautiful color pictures of them. Without the direct engagement of the professionals, the mystery of HMS Speedy will remain. Question: does it matter? As a historian, I can tell you plainly that it does not matter very much to me. Oh, it would be wonderful if we could eliminate the mystery, add a new piece to the broad mosaic of Canadian history. I would be the happiest person around if that could be accomplished. However, the fact remains that the story of HMS Speedy is a rich and fascinating part of Canadian history, even without pieces of wood and metal in a museum. It is part of our heritage, and that is good enough for me. In the meantime, we will continue to tell the story and learn what we can from it. And it is a great story. That's the end of the story of HMS Speedy. If you would like a more detailed version of the story, see my book, The Wreck of HMS Speedy, The Tragedy That Shook Upper Canada. It's available in Indigo and Chapter stores as well as your local bookstore and library. For more information about me and my history work, check out my webpage, danbuchananhistoryguy.com. After the book is released, history buffs will be able to download files containing additional information on related topics that did not make it into the book. See the Extra Info page. I love feedback, so don't hesitate to send an email to danbuchanan@cogeco.ca. Thanks so much for your interest, and I hope you enjoyed the story of HMS Speedy.